This video should help you understand one of the coolest rhythms, the dotted quarter note. First, let's remind ourselves of the dot rule. The kind of dot we're talking about is one like these that happens next to the note. Remember the dot rule yet? The dot is equal to 1/2 of the value of the note it is attached to. Sound familiar yet? Now we've got a pretty simple math problem. Think about the value of the dot. It is half the value of the note it is attached to. So if we think about a whole note being worth 4 beats, half of 4 is 2. So we need to add a half note to this because a half note is worth 2 beats. The total value of this dotted whole note would be 6 beats. Let's do the same thing with our dotted half note. A half note by itself is worth 2 beats, since we have our dot attached here, and it's half the value of the note that the dot is attached to. Then 1 beat should be added to this note. The total value of this dotted half note is 3 beats. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Now we get to our favorite new rhythm, the dotted quarter note. Think about what half the value of a quarter note is. If you're thinking eighth note, you're correct. One single eighth note is half a beat. Since this dot is equal to half of a quarter note, we add them together. We're going to end up with 1.5 beats. That's okay. We got 1 plus a half here. Let's think in 4/4 time and break down this rhythm a little bit further. We'll start with the easy part, these 2 beats at the end. Since they're the last 2 beats of the measure, they're going to be beats 3 and 4. I'm going to go ahead and add my ands in here with my line over the top so that we can account for every single number and in the measure. When we're finished diagramming this measure, we should have 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and, all accounted for. Remember that when the line is drawn on top of the rhythm, we're only going to say this first thing that's underneath the line. So to count the end of this measure, we would just say 3, 4, instead of 3 and, 4 and. The and is said in your head. Now if we go back to the beginning, measures are always going to start with 1, so we can pretty safely put a 1 down here. Just like these quarter notes over here, this quarter note, ignoring the dot, is going to take up a number as well as an and. So I'll go ahead and put my and, knowing that I'm probably going to have to draw a line over it in a minute, but we still have to think about this dot. Remembering back to the dot rule, the dot is worth half the value of the note it is attached to. A dot that's attached to a quarter note like this is worth 1/8 note. So that is worth 1 of these syllables that we say. So I'm going to add 2 right here. That takes care of the 3 syllables for this beat. There's only one thing left over. Do you know what it is? We have 1 and, 2, 3 and, 4 and. All we're missing is the and for this beat. To count this measure really accurately, you're going to have to think about the eighth notes in your head. Inside your head, you should be counting 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and, just like we wrote out down here. That's what your brain's thinking. Now your mouth has to say something different, which is when this gets tricky. Your mouth only says the beginning of each one of these lines. Your mouth will only say 1 and 3, 4. Let's look at this rhythm another way. If I wrote it with some ties instead, it might look a little bit different. Here's my quarter note. Here's my eighth note here. Here's 2 more quarter notes for beats 3 and 4. Now I skipped the dot. Remember what the dot is worth? It is worth 1 single eighth note. So here's my dot. And using a tie, I'll tie those notes together. Remember that a tie is like a plus sign in math. It adds 2 notes together, sometimes more than 2. This is simply another way to write this measure up here. This will sound exactly the same. Let's diagram it quickly. This is 1 and, because it's a quarter note. 2, the first half of beat 2, and these are tied together, so I draw my line. Here's the and of beat 2, then 3 and with our line, and then 4 and with our line. Make sure you pay attention to these lines. They help your brain to remember how long to hold each note out for. Let's count this measure. Ready and count. 1 and 3, 4. Another way to think about this rhythm is by using your foot and thinking about the downs and the ups that your foot is doing. As long as you are a good even foot topper, this is going to help you. If you have trouble topping your toe, then this may confuse you more. So, we'll try it. This rhythm will sound like this. Down, up, down, down. If I'm moving my foot down and up steadily. Down, up, again, and go. Down, up, down, down. So this rhythm actually, this beat right here, this note, is a down, an up, and a down. And then on the next up is when you change to the and. Your challenge this week is to diagram, like this, write out the numbers and the ands, including the lines, a rhythm that Mrs. White gives to you on the board. To start to complete this challenge, you'll have to give Mrs. White a secret passcode. The secret passcode is the word cage. The trick is that when she asks you for the secret word, you have to play it on your instrument. Happy practicing!